Welcome to Reformed Thinking, where we take a stack of source material and jump into a deep dive.
Today, we are opening up the Sermon on the Mount, and we're going to be focusing pretty intensely on a very small, but let's say a highly volatile section,
That would be Jesus' teaching on prayer in Matthew chapter 6.
specifically verses 5 and 6. This little passage is just a crucial definition of what life looks like when it's really lived under the rule of God's kingdom.
And our mission for this deep dive is to try and cut through all the noise that surrounds religious practice, all the performance, and get absolute clarity on one thing.
And that one thing is the difference between prayer that's aimed at human recognition, at applause, and prayer that's sincerely aimed at God.
Right, we're going to trace this vertical versus horizontal distinction throughout the entire chapter.
And we have to start with the governing principle, the controlling idea that really sets the context for everything else Jesus is about to say about piety.
You're talking about that big warning.
That's it, the entire section. So Matthew 6, verses 1 through 18, which covers giving, praying, and fasting, it's all framed by this one programmatic warning.
Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them.
And that warning is the tripwire for the entire Christian life, you know.
It really is. The central danger Jesus is getting at here is a kind of spiritual self-promotion.
Yeah, it's this temptation to take genuinely holy activities, prayer, giving, sacrifice, and to sort of hijack them for our own ends.
We use them to secure earthly wages.
Yeah.
Things like honor, influence, reputation. It's turning devotion into a visibility campaign.
And our sources really confirm that out of that triad, giving, praying, and fasting, prayer is chosen as the most intimate and, because of that, the most dangerous example of this problem.
Because prayer is supposed to be a vertical conversation, right? Secret communion.
Exactly. And yet it is so easily, almost reflexively, corrupted into a public horizontal performance that's just staged for a crowd.
So we want to ask you, the listener, as we start this, to bring that question into your own heart.
Which gaze matters more to you?
Is it the eyes of passing people on the street, or is it the eyes of the Father who sees everything, even in secret?
That spiritual barometer is going to govern every insight we uncover today.
Okay, let's open with the specifics of Matthew chapter 6, verse 5.
Jesus doesn't start by commanding prayer, which is interesting. He starts by just assuming it.
He says, when you pray, not if you pray.
That's essential. Prayer is taken for granted as an expected and ordinary, a consistent rhythm of life for anyone who's seeking the kingdom.
But right after that assumption comes this really sharp, non-negotiable prohibition.
You must not be like the hypocrites.
And the way that's constructed in the Greek, it functions as a command, a deliberate, necessary distancing from a specific spiritual disease.
It's an imperative. Do not adopt their way of life.
And the whole diagnosis hinges on that one Greek term, hypokritē.
It does. We use the word hypocrite today to mean, someone who is a liar or just inconsistent in what they say and do.
Sure.
But in the first century, as our sources highlight, the literal working definition was stage actors.
Stage actors, or those wearing a mask.
And that shift in understanding is so instructive.
It changes everything.
It does. Jesus isn't primarily accusing them of moral inconsistency, although that's certainly part of it. He's accusing them of adopting a public persona.
So they were treating their spiritual devotion not as a relationship, but as a role they played on a stage. They put on the mask of piety.
And just think about what a mask does. The mask is not the true face.
No.
It's an artificial construction. It's worn specifically to get a reaction from an audience.
So the Hippocrates is fundamentally preoccupied not with reality, not with what's true in their heart before God, but with the cultivated perception of truth that the spectators have.
And that instantly establishes the absolute dichotomy that defines this whole passage.
It's the fork in the road.
It is. When you engage in prayer, when you seek God, you are forced onto one of two paths. You are either a genuine child speaking freely, intimately, authentically to a father,
or you are a professional actor performing a sacred script for the acclaim of a crowd.
and there is no middle territory.
So where does this actor choose to perform? Jesus tells us.
He says the hypocrites love, that's philousin in the Greek, they love to pray at specific high-visibility venues.
The synagogues and the street corners.
And that word philia here is strong. It suggests a deep, a cherished affinity for these places because they provide what the actor wants most.
A stage.
A stage.
No, we have to be careful here not to misinterpret this.
We do. Standing was a standard posture for prayer in Jewish tradition, and the synagogue was the proper place for communal devotion. Jesus isn't condemning standing or praying in the synagogue.
So what's the actual target of the condemnation then?
The target is the underlying motive. It's the intentional choice of the environment. Let's look at the street corners, the gunyai tungplatin.
This isn't just a vague term for a busy spot, is it?
Not at all. It refers to the intersection points of the major public squares, the points of maximum foot and cart traffic.
So, in first-century Jewish life, especially in the major towns, there were fixed hours of prayer morning, afternoon, evening.
Yes, often correlated with the daily temple sacrifices.
And our sources indicate that these hypocrites, they timed their devotion perfectly.
Oh, this was not an accident. They didn't just get caught praying in public. They specifically sought out, crafted, and cherished the moment when the formal hour of prayer coincided with peak rush hour at the four-way intersection.
The entire purpose was to maximize exposure.
The text is explicit about it. Hopos phanisen toi anthropo, in order that they may be seen by others.
So this isn't just a side effect of their prayer.
No, it is the objective. The stage is set, the actor is performing, and the currency they're looking for is recognition.
And this reveals the core theological problem here, the horizontal gaze.
That's a good way to put it. When the primary direction of religious practice shifts sideways toward man, rather than vertically toward God, the orientation of life itself just becomes disordered.
The sources define this as a fundamentally disordered orientation.
Well, think about what this behavior implies. It's saying the silent, unseen approval of the omnipresent, omniscient God is not enough to motivate me.
I need more.
I require the visible, audible, immediate confirmation of human beings.
And that's where the fear of man really intersects with a kind of spiritual idolatry.
It is. They are preferring the momentary, fleeting gaze of the crowd over the constant, perfect gaze of the Father. They're trading the Creator's approval for the creation's fleeting notice.
Their theology, as you said earlier, it's dangerously thin.
Well, they operate functionally as if God's unseen presence is weak or maybe impotent. If God truly saw them and approved of them in secret, why would they need to manufacture a scene for human onlookers?
It's like they treat God's presence like a camera that only turns on when a human audience is present.
That's a great analogy for today.
Right.
Imagine prayer not as a private communication, but as a live stream event.
Right, and the hypocrite doesn't care about the content of the message. They're just obsessed with the view count, the likes, the comments.
The goal is engagement metrics, measured by applause, not communion with the living God. They have made prayer into a broadcast studio where visibility is the highest value.
And the problem with a broadcast studio is that it guarantees the performance will be tailored to the audience's expectation, not God's glory.
Exactly. They are performing the role of the pious one, conforming their demeanor, their vocabulary, even the length of their prayer to meet the public standard of holiness.
So the ultimate takeaway from this first section is pretty simple, but it's challenging.
If we choose a stage, we confirm our identity as an actor.
And an actor is always at the mercy of the crowd.
So once Jesus has dissected the motive, this desire to be seen and applauded, he moves immediately to the consequence.
And it's a solemn, authoritative pronouncement introduced by the king's binding verdict.
Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. That opening, Amen, legal kaimin, signals the finality and the gravity of what's about to come.
It sounds like an irreversible judgment, but the stunning part is the terminology Jesus uses for they have received. It's highly specific.
It is. The Greek verb is epitousin.
And this is one of those crucial details that a deep dive into the historical sources really brings out.
Yes. Epitousin is not just a generic word for possessing something. It is technical commercial terminology. Our sources show us this verb was routinely used on ancient receipts, legal contracts, financial ledgers.
And it carries the specific transactional meaning, paid in full.
Paid in full.
That changes the entire tone of the verse. It moves it from a general statement of fact to a chilling accountancy note.
It signals that a business transaction is now completely closed. The hypocrite performed a religious service, the public prayer. The audience rendered its payment applause and admiration.
And the ledger is settled. They have collected their check on earth.
And the related noun here is mistithos, which means wage or payment for service rendered.
So they traded a spiritual relationship for a commercial transaction.
They actively chose a cash payment from men rather than accepting the gift of grace and fellowship from God.
This choice just reveals a deeply disordered value system.
It does. They had two potential sources of reward: the infinite generosity of God or the finite praise of men. And they chose the praise of men. They prioritize the tangible, immediate payment over the invisible, deferred blessing.
So we have to analyze the content of this wage. What exactly did the hypocrite get?
Well, they got human notice, they got admiration, temporary recognition. The key observation is that they received precisely what they aimed for. Jesus acknowledges they achieved their goal.
They wanted to look holy. People thought they looked holy. Transaction complete.
But the tragic limitation is the duration. This mistos is described as purely this worldly. It's immediate, which means it's quickly consumable.
And it's fleeting. The applause, no matter how loud it is, it lasts maybe 30 seconds.
The admiration dissipates the moment they walk away from the street corner. The recognition is exhausted.
So the tragedy of this paid-in-full verdict is twofold.
First, they mistook the means for the end. They thought the admiration they thought was the reward for piety, instead of recognizing that piety is oriented towards God.
And the second part is even more damning.
Yes. Because the transaction is irrevocably completed, paid in full, the hypocrite has utterly forfeited any further claim on God regarding that act of piety.
They can't stand before the Father on the last day, point to their public prayer at the street corner, and ask for credit.
That credit was already used up. They exchanged an eternal claim for a temporal, trivial puff of vanity.
Think about the spiritual poverty this creates. They traded the possibility of eternal, incorruptible glory for what is basically noise.
They chose transient praise over lasting validation. It's a terrifying indictment of human short-sightedness, valuing the immediate penny over the distant gold mine.
The analogy of the contractor is incredibly fitting here.
It is. A contractor finishes the job and immediately demands the final cash payment. Once that money is in their hand, the agreement is terminated.
Yeah.
The employer owes them nothing further.
There's no relationship, just a closed ledger.
And the hypocrite demanded immediate payment from the audience. And in receiving it, they severed the chance of being paid by the Father later. They were bought out by the crowd's shallow approval.
This point is particularly important for us, for those of us who hold to a covenantal theology rooted in God's grace.
Yes. Even though our rewards are gifts, not wages earned by merit, and we'll come back to this in a bit, the principle still holds.
If you seek the reward of men, you demonstrate that your treasure is here, now.
And therefore, you have forfeited the reward that is stored up in heaven.
It raises a really piercing question for everyone listening. Where are you cashing your checks?
Are you seeking immediate spiritual gratification from those around you, knowing that immediate payment means the relationship with the ultimate employer is financially settled?
Or are you willing to wait, trusting the Father's promise?
And having delivered that devastating verdict on the actors who chase these fleeting rewards, Jesus shifts the instruction.
He does it with a deliberate, emphatic contrast. But you, when you pray,
the focus moves away from they, the actors, and it lands squarely on you, the disciple.
And this antithesis introduces the alternative method, the kingdom way of seeking God.
The command is twofold. Disciples are instructed to enter your inner room, and then specifically to shut your door.
We should probably pause on the geography of this instruction. What exactly is this inner room?
The Greek term is tamion. We often translate this as closet, but it was much more specific in a typical first-century home.
It wasn't designed to be a grand sanctuary or anything like that.
Not at all. The tamion was a small interior storage chamber. It could be a storage closet for valuables, a pantry for food, a treasury. Crucially, in many common dwellings, it was the space least likely to have windows.
And it was designed to be easily locked off from the main activity of the house.
So the tamion is selected precisely because it's the most hidden, most ordinary, most unremarkable space possible.
It's the location that guarantees zero visibility.
And this is why we have to avoid taking this as a rule of legalistic geography.
Right. Jesus is not establishing a law that God only processes prayers originating from small, dark rooms.
No. The sources rightly identify this as a spiritual pedagogy. It's a teaching tool that's enacted geographically.
So that physical withdrawal, entering the tamion and shutting the door, it's like an enacted parable.
It is. And its design purpose is a kind of spiritual triage. It physically strips away the human audience. The noise at the street corner, the faces of the crowd, all of them are excluded.
And this is the ultimate test of sincerity.
The closed door forces the disciple to confront their own motivation without distraction.
If I know absolutely no human eye sees me, no one will applaud, no one will be impressed, and no reputation will be built.
Do I still desire to seek the Father?
If the answer is yes, then the act is pure. If the answer is no, then the act was always fundamentally about self-display, and the stage needs to be dismantled.
The practice of secrecy acts as a spiritual discipline. It actively kills the impulse toward image building and self-promotion that is so endemic to the human heart.
The physical act of shutting the door confirms the shift in audience.
When we're alone in the Tumion, we are forced to deal with God and God alone. This is critical for authentic spiritual formation.
The door is shut to the world so that the heart can open fully to the divine presence.
And the language confirms the new identity we adopt behind that locked door. The command is to pray to your Father.
So the disciple is no longer functioning as an actor, a hypocrisy.
No. They are now operating in the security of sonship. This language establishes intimacy, acceptance, and adoption, the prerequisite for authentic filial communion.
The prayer is no longer a public broadcast. It's a family conversation.
And a family conversation is messy, honest, often desperate, and completely unconcerned with external presentation. You are simply talking to your dad.
This practice reorients our entire theology of God's presence.
It does. We are commanded to pray to the Father who is in secret and who sees in secret. This trains the disciple to trust completely in the sufficiency and the certainty of the unseen.
It teaches the heart a vital lesson. The Father's unseen gaze is constant, it's sufficient, and it's infinitely more valuable than all the visible, fleeting gazes of the world combined.
The center of gravity of one's spiritual life is definitively relocated back to God, away from the transient opinions of man.
What's really fascinating here is the contrast in God's omniscience. The fact that God sees everything, that he sees us seeking the spotlight at the street corner, that's terrifying for the hypocrite because it exposes their duplicity.
But that very same divine omniscience becomes sweet consolation to the sincere disciple in the inner room.
Right. Knowing that the Father sees me, even when I am silent or groaning or struggling, is the ultimate comfort.
I am not forgotten, simply because I am not visible to the crowd. My hidden obedience is known by the one whose opinion matters most.
So the disciple treats prayer like a private study, or maybe the family treasury. The door is locked to the world and its rating systems.
And the conversation is strictly between a child and their father, with a quiet confidence that this intimacy is its own immediate reward, a foretaste of the future gift.
And in direct, beautiful contrast to the hypocrite who was instantly paid off with a finite wage.
The promise given to the genuine disciple is certain, and it's future-focused. The Father will reward you. That's apodosisoi.
And this shift from the immediate closed transaction, the apeshusin, to the future open promise, the apodose, that's everything.
It is. But for those of us who hold to a faith defined by grace, we really have to clarify the nature of this divine reward.
Right. We have to avoid the error of misunderstanding this reward as a wage earned by merit.
Because our prayers, even those whispered in secret, are imperfect. If we earned heaven on the basis of our prayer purity, we would all fail.
The sources affirm that from a Reformed perspective, this reward is entirely a gracious gift. It does not place God in our debt.
No. Rather, the Father is graciously crowning his own work in his children. Our secret prayers are evidence of the grace already at work in us, and the reward is his free favor given for Christ's sake.
That is a crucial distinction.
It is. The future verb apodose means he will pay, or he will render payment. It promises a return based not on a calculation, but on the Father's boundless generosity.
A generosity that far surpasses the value of the action itself.
It flows from relational connection, from sonship, not from a commercial contract.
And the beauty of this divine payment is that it has a dual content. It's not just reserved for the future. There's a tangible present reward here on earth.
That present reward includes things like deeper communion, peace that surpasses understanding, and joy in God.
The simple consolation of knowing that the sovereign, omniscient Father's gaze is resting upon you in approval even when the world ignores you. That is a profound, immediate blessing.
This is the comfort of secrecy, the immediate relational wealth of intimacy.
But the primary focus is the future, the eschatological reward.
This is where the disciple ultimately receives the public recognition that the hypocrite craved and failed to secure.
That future reward involves public commendation at the last day.
The disciple who deliberately rejected the stage will be placed upon it by the King himself and will hear the public words of approval. Well done, good and faithful servant. This is participation in eternal glory.
Just think about the irony of that. The prayers whispered in the dark, the quiet, unseen struggles, the tears shed in the Tamium.
All of these hidden things will be openly vindicated by the King of the universe. The things we did to avoid the spotlight will be the very things God chooses to celebrate eternally.
And this forces us into a choice between two entirely different eschatologies.
Two different views of what matters in the end. The choice between rewards is a choice between two treasures, one corruptible and one incorruptible.
The hypocrite chooses the immediate, visible earthly wage, which is instant cash, but it evaporates instantly. They chose a disposable treasure.
Whereas the disciple chooses the delayed, unseen reward, a treasure that is meticulously stored up and guaranteed to be enduring, held securely in the unwavering hand of the Father.
So let's just summarize that radical contrast one last time.
The hypocrite demanded to be seen by men and received only visibility, a superficial, momentary thing.
The disciple asked only to be heard by the Father and will receive intimacy now and glory later.
The analogy of the heir clarifies this relational motivation perfectly.
Yeah.
The disciple is not an hourly worker clocking in for a wage.
No.
The disciple is an heir working in the family field out of love and obligation, knowing that the Father is the guarantor of their entire future. The Father secures the inheritance, which far exceeds any small daily wage.
Their motivation is love and sonship, not commercial payment.
And we have to now take this deep dive even further and move past just ethical instruction.
Right, because if Matthew 6.56 were presented to us simply as a set of rules, pray in your closet and keep your motives pure, we would all stand condemned.
We would. Our motives, even in our most secluded prayers, are always mixed. They're tainted by subtle desires for self-justification or self-congratulation.
That's the ultimate tension of the Sermon on the Mount, isn't it? It presents a standard of righteousness that is humanly impossible to achieve perfectly.
It is. And the only way we can stand under the condemnation of this law without being crushed is by understanding that Christ fulfilled this law perfectly, and his perfection is applied to us.
He fulfills it first as our model.
Jesus did not simply preach the command to enter the inner room. He lived it flawlessly. The sources trace his lifelong pattern of repeatedly withdrawing to solitary places to pray.
Think of the times recorded in the Gospels. Mark 1.35 tells us he rose very early in the morning while it was still dark and went off to a desolate place to pray.
Or Luke 5.16, which notes that he would often withdraw to desolate places and pray. He constantly rejected the temptation to cultivate a public image of mystical piety.
So the command for us to enter the inner room is, therefore, not just a rule, but a gracious invitation into his own pattern of hidden fellowship with the Father.
We are invited to pray as the true Son prayed.
And this hidden obedience, this perfect withdrawal, it reaches its climax and ultimate enactment in the Garden of Gethsemane.
This is the moment we have to analyze closely, because Gethsemane is the ultimate tamion.
Jesus literally went a little farther than his disciples. He left them behind at the entrance.
He entered the dark, lonely space under the olive trees, the ultimate inner room of submission, where no human eyes could fully observe him. His closest friends were asleep.
In that darkness, where visibility was zero, he entered into an agonizing spiritual struggle, submitting his human will to the divine will.
Praying, "Not my will, but yours be done." That was the foundational act of obedience, the perfect fulfillment of the command to pray in secret, performed when no one was watching.
He succeeded in that secret submission where Adam failed in the garden, and where the nation of Israel failed throughout its history.
This is Christ as the second Adam and true Israel succeeding in perfect secret obedience.
But here is the critical theological connection, the thing that's so central to Reformed thought.
Yes, this perfect secret prayer life is not simply an example we try to emulate with our mixed motives. Christ's secret sinless prayer life is part of the perfect active righteousness that is imputed to believers through faith.
We should probably take a moment to unpack imputation in this specific context.
We should. When the Bible talks about the righteousness credited to us, it includes not just Christ's passive obedience, his death covering our penalty, but his active obedience,
His perfect, lifelong fulfillment of every command.
including the command to pray purely.
And this imputation is how the Father accepts our faltering devotion.
Christ's perfect obedience at the street corner, his rejection of the spotlight, and his perfect submission in the inner room of Gethsemane, that entire flawless prayer life is credited to the believer.
This is the atonement covering the guilt of our tendency towards self-promotion and our constant, subtle, mixed motive prayers.
And the work doesn't stop there. He continues this work now as our ascended high priest.
So he takes the prayers we whisper in our own inner room, prayers that we know are still tainted by pride or distraction or self-interest.
And he receives them. and he performs the function of refining them.
The high priest takes the sincere, though imperfect, devotion of his people and purifies it.
He removes the taint of sin and the subtle desire for human applause, making those prayers acceptable to the Father for his sake, because they are now cloaked in his perfection.
So we have filial access to the very presence of God, not because our motive was 100% pure when we shut the tamion door.
But because our high priest is actively interceding, presenting our petition enveloped in his sinless intercession.
The analogy we used earlier really ties this whole section together.
The apprentice, that's the believer, attempts to carve a beautiful structure of devotion, but they are distracted by the noise of the public square, and the carving is crooked.
And the master architect Christ builds the flawlessly beautiful structure in secret submission at Gethsemane.
The master architect then takes the apprentice's clumsy, impure attempts at carving our half-hearted prayers and places them securely inside his own perfect finished structure.
And then he presents the combined work to the king.
The king does not accept the work because of the apprentice's effort. The king accepts the entire structure solely because of the master architect's perfection.
This is the gospel significance of Matthew 6:5-6. We are called to strive for purity in the inner room, but we rest in the knowledge that Christ has already achieved it for us and is mediating our failure.
This deep dive into Matthew 6:5-6 has fundamentally revealed that the issue in prayer is not physical location.
Nor is it the length or the eloquence of our words. It is audience. The passage forces every believer to ask, whose approval do you truly covet? Whose gaze determines your value?
And the theological insight delivered here is absolutely clear. The error of hypocrisy is the quiet assumption that visible human approval is somehow more immediate, more satisfying, and therefore more necessary than the invisible approval of the omniscient God.
True kingdom righteousness demands a complete reversal of this priority.
The command to shut the door is fundamentally a call to repentance, a call to turn away from the quiet idol of reputation and consistently cultivate a hidden life with God.
A life based, thankfully, not on the purity of our efforts, but on Christ's perfect fulfillment of the law and his ongoing mediation for us at the Father's right hand.
We are called to step off the stage and renounce the fleeting applause of men, replacing that craving with the hunger for the intimacy and the coming glory promised by the Father.
And since the Father will reward those who live for his unseen gaze, those who trust his invisible validation, what is one visible aspect of your spiritual life, perhaps one you've been tempted to share, or one you usually perform within earshot of others, that you might deliberately choose to perform in absolute secret this coming week, knowing that the only applause that matters is the one you will hear on the last day?